Navigating through the energies of New Earth is not an easy process and can become extremely overwhelming at times. As we all ascend into higher frequencies, we're all being guided to embrace our own unique divine pathway, a pathway created in the vibration of love. Join Vibe Nation radio host, international psychic medium Carrie Turcotte, as she guides her listeners to rediscover themselves by accessing the keys of knowledge that already exist within. Each week's show is divinely orchestrated to intertwine with the universal energies, allowing the listeners to go deeper within and understand the message being shared even greater. When you live in the frequency of love, there is no competition, so Carrie will be joined regularly by fellow soul family members who will bring forth wisdom and knowledge she knows should be shared on a global level. At the end of each show, Carrie will tap into the energies of the listeners to see what message Spirit wants to share with all those listening in for the upcoming week. If you really want to get to know who you truly are, come and join us now on Vibe Nation Radio, here on the IOM Radio Network.
And we are up and running. And as many of you know, I'm Chris Anderson, Onefeather, and for the summer, we're doing an Indian summer here. And that basically means, since I'm part Native American, I'm going to be the Indian that presides over summer with you guys. Anyway, I have a guest here with me, Mr. Barrett Hadeen, who has been doing past life regressions, past life readings for people for quite a few years now. How are things in your part of the universe, Barrett?
I'm doing great, Chris. It's a real honor to be here with you, and I'm excited to share with people about past lives and how we can use them to have healthier and happier lives here.
That's great. Now, how did you first discover that you had this intuitive capacity to pick up on people's previous lifetimes and kind of sort them out? Because there are a lot of people hanging out here on the planet, and that's a lot of stuff that is trying to bubble up from the depths of the subconscious.
Well, it's true, Chris, and yeah, it's, when we think of this world, we can start to think of it as a hologram, and that means that everything is always here in this moment and in every moment. So it is kind of a startling idea. For me personally, I was on my own healing journey, and I was learning about energy healing, and I was taking classes and realizing I had a lot of unconscious fears and challenges and things, and I was starting to let go of some of them. In one of these energy healing workshops, I was kind of going within, and I was starting to encounter this really strong feeling of guilt. So as always, when we do these kind of healing things, we're learning that we just need to stay with whatever the emotion is. So I didn't know what the source of this guilt was, so I just stayed with it. And as I stayed with it, what eventually came forward in my mind was that this was guilt over having killed someone. Now, this was kind of surprising to me because I knew I hadn't killed anyone, at least in this life, right? So what became pretty clear to me right away was that this sense of guilt that I was working on healing was actually from another lifetime. And it was a lifetime where I was what you might call like a barbarian or a warrior. I killed people, in battle. And even though it was my role or my responsibility in that time and place, the soul, kind of like gets stuck with the emotions and the grief. Anytime we commit an act of violence, we're really thickening our karma, or we're creating more unconscious guilt in the mind. So in that experience, it just was coming forward for me to heal and release. And that seemed to be sort of a window into opening into any number of different past lives that started to come forward for me. I've had lifetimes where I've remembered dying as a baby during the birthing process. I've had lifetimes where I lifetimes weren't always so bad, times as a monk or times as a spiritual seeker in the past. And these things are all coming forward for healing. So eventually, as time went on, I started to be able to have the same sensitivity and ability for other people, and specifically for clients I was doing healing work with, and to the point where today it's a pretty substantial part of my practice. And I like to help people move through these karmic issues, because when we let go of them, then we can step into a greater sense of happiness and peace.
That's beautiful. And how about people who are absolutely convinced that they were Cleopatra or King Tut or somebody of significance historically? I'm sure that you probably encounter a lot of people who have that belief that they were somebody simply because of the charisma, the notoriety of the individual. Do you find that that's true, or 90% of it is just them wanting to self-aggrandize?
Well, I usually take it on a case-by-case basis. I think there is some of both, as you mentioned. There are people that are thinking that they were some famous person in a past lifetime just because it makes them feel good. But on the other side of things, I think that past lives really demonstrate the true duality of our world, because even just the few lifetimes I mentioned that I've experienced, they're a small sample of the number that I actually have gotten in touch with. You can see, well, some of those lifetimes seem good, some didn't, and it really helps us to see, well, we've actually been in just about every situation. So I'm a strong believer that almost everybody has had many thousands of lifetimes, and some of these lifetimes are just your normal Joe Schmo lifetimes. Some of these lifetimes are awful lifetimes, painful, severe poverty or crushing illness. And other lifetimes, sure, yeah, there are those lifetimes where we're the king, or we're the Bill Gates of that era, or what have you. So I think that we've all been someone famous in at least one lifetime, someone that we would really be surprised to know that that's who we are. But interestingly, that's not very much a focus of my work, because in the sessions that I do, my goal is always to really support people's healing journeys. And so lifetimes that are often obscure or wouldn't really mean something to us, from our perspective, will come up because, for example, maybe there was this severe heartbreak in another lifetime that still is wanting healing, or there was a lifetime where severe crushing poverty was what you experienced, and by bringing it forward and looking at it and healing the energy around it, you can actually change your experience of this life. So that's where I think the value of this all comes in, is allowing people to live this lifetime from a place of more power and more security and more joy.
Well, that sounds like you're able to penetrate whatever illusions people may be walking around with, and by doing a session with you, they'll get information that is more salient, more to the point, and can actually do them some good. Yeah,
and the term that I sometimes use is like a past life tourist, because there are people who want to be like a tourist of their past lives. That kind of session doesn't appeal to me, because what my passion is helping people let go of their wounds. So it may be the case that a famous lifetime will come forward, but again, that's really a small percentage of the sessions that I do where something like that comes in. So yeah, it really is more about helping clear through whatever false thinking, false beliefs, false traumas people are carrying around in their unconscious mind, carrying around basically unconsciously in your energy field, so that you can be free of that and live a life that really is based in your truth and in your joy. So, if people do have a particular question about a lifetime that they've lived, I'm happy to, either validate that or say I'm not thinking that's actually the case. But again, that's sort of like a side point to the major work that I do.
So, essentially, though, the information is on demand. It's not like you're blocked occasionally with people, or does that happen? Do you run into situations where, you have somebody arrive and you're doing a session with them and you're just not getting anything? Does that ever come up?
No, I've never had it where I don't get anything. But basically, all this healing, all the work that comes through me is really coming through me. It's not of me or from me in particular. These sessions, I really feel I'm turning myself over to Spirit and letting myself be used as a vessel for the healing. So occasionally people will ask a specific question or want more information about a specific thing, and I'll get a pretty clear message from Spirit that this is not to be known. So there are times where the answer that I give people is this: I don't have any information for you. But it's not because the channel's not open. It's really more, you could say it's their higher self saying this would not be helpful to share. So then it just doesn't come to me. So the things that do come to me are things that are helpful, that would be a benefit to the person.
Well, that's good. So, in other words, this is not just you pulling up a bunch of random stuff and throwing it at them. You're actually kind of being directed as to what is acceptable, what is, what has meaning as far as relevant information, right? And we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you been searching for a perspective beyond the mainstream? Check it out. Join your hosts Cielito Pascual and Diana Gold Holland on Share International Radio for thought-provoking views behind the news. Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio. You can also find us at shareontheairradio.org. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
And I am speaking with Barrett Hadeen, and we are talking about the phenomenon of reincarnation and looking at past life recall. Barrett, I have always been kind of close to this whole idea of reincarnation because I grew up in Colorado in the 1950s in a little town called Pueblo. And in 1952, Colorado businessman and amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein put a housewife, Virginia Tighe, into a trance, and he took her back to, her birth, and then they were able to keep going. And all of a sudden, she started revealing the story of a 19th century Irish woman
Nice.
And how, she was that Irish woman, born 59 years after her previous lifetime in Ireland. But the interesting thing was that there was a huge amount of detail. So it was decided that, or she revealed that her name in that previous lifetime was Bridie Murphy. And when Bridie was 8 years old, she was living in a house in Cork. She was a daughter of Duncan Murphy, a barrister, and his wife Kathleen. At the age of 17, she married Sean Brian McCarthy and moved to Belfast. Tig told of a fall that caused Bridie's death and of watching her own funeral, which I thought was interesting, describing her tombstone and the state of being in life after death. It was, she recalled, a feeling of neither pain nor happiness. She was just in a zone. Somehow she was reborn in America and, became Virginia Tag in 1923. So it wouldn't have probably had an awful lot of impact were it not for the fact that she had given a lot of detailed information. And Bernstein published it, turned it into a book, and they went to Ireland and were able to validate everything. And this wasn't a very famous person. This was just a common girl who grew up in Ireland. But they had all these facts that there's no way that this woman living in the Midwest would have had access to. So that search for Bridie Murphy became quite a hit in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and a lot of people all of a sudden got a validation about past life experiences. So I was wondering if you've had that experience of bringing through information that was detailed enough so people could go do research and find out, was I this person, and what were the circumstances that I was experiencing in a previous lifetime.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty fascinating, and these stories do really, they provide the proof that this is real. But I have this interesting kind of perspective on this, which is I have almost no desire or impulse to try to prove this is real to anyone. So, I think people will believe what they want to believe, and if people are open to this, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of stories similar to what you just shared that really open people's eyes and minds. So I think because of this sort of slant that I have, I rarely get detail to that level of what you just shared. When the example I mentioned before the commercial break, if during a healing someone is trying to move through some heartbreak that they had in a previous lifetime, the specific names and some of these other details, they're sort of like optional. We can see the issue of the pain that needs healing. We can hold the sadness and the tears over that breakup and that heart sadness, and heal it without, kind of like having the address of where this person lived, so to speak. So that is not a big facet in the kind of work that I do, but I do respect the people who bring through that level of detail, and I know there are so many of these kinds of experiences that they do speak to the reality of this phenomenon.
Very good. So let's say somebody comes to you and they're looking for something that was a source of pain or a source of physical disability or something like that. What if you get information that goes in an entirely different direction, and instead of addressing the current issue that they are trying to resolve, you're off on a whole different journey with a lot of other information coming through that really doesn't seem pertinent to the issue that they're trying to address? What do you do then?
Well, I also don't really have that experience. What I found is that the intention that is set at the beginning of the session really dictates the kind of information that comes forward. So if somebody comes in and they've got some, say, physical back pain that, they've tried different techniques and it hasn't really resolved, and they want us to use the healing of the session to work on that back pain, inevitably, the things that will come forward for me will be related to the issues and the energy that's in their back. Now, it may be true that other things will come in addition to that. Now, if they have one main problem, it may be that we spend, a good chunk of the time on that problem, and then we also look at, one or two other, or maybe a handful of things on a call that they're ready to heal and move through. So, so if people want something to be worked on, then it definitely is something we will look at and work on.
Very good. Here's a question from out on the fringe of our society. Have you ever encountered somebody who, in a previous lifetime, or perhaps even multiple lifetimes, was not from this planet? Have you had that crossover into communication about aliens and alien realms?
Yeah, that does come up. I would say again, most of the time that doesn't surface, but actually very few of us have lived all of our lifetimes on this planet. Pretty much all of us, and particularly people who are interested in spiritual phenomena, tend to have had other lifetimes on other planets. So a lot of times this will create some of the jarring experiences that people have in this world. A certain number of people in the spiritual community, for example, they really struggle around money as a concept and like working with money in the world. Well, it may well be that one of the reasons for that is because in their last lifetime, they lived in a culture that didn't have money. So they're not used to it conceptually. They're not, they think, well, things should just be exchanged freely and compassionately because that's how the world works the best. And other cultures and other planets have figured that out already, but we're still kind of getting there. So that's just one example of how, living a lifetime in another culture as another alien race may be impacting your life today, and how doing some healing work around that and clearing through some of these challenges energetically will help you with these very practical things like, well, I want to have a good relationship with money. How can I get there? And just another point around that is, as I was kind of doing my own healing work, and I continued to do that as well while I moved forward on my life, I did open up to other lifetimes of mine where they were not on Earth, and realizing that I have a very strong Pleiadian connection to that culture, that was a fairly recent lifetime for me. And so I have a very strong affinity to the Pleiadians and their energy.
Interesting, because my tribal affiliation, the Potawatomi, when you ask some of the elders, and going back in history, it's been documented a lot of elders in the tribe, even back in the 1800s, late 1700s, would refer to the Pleiades as their source, as where they originated. And so just out of curiosity, do you pick up that perhaps I have a similar connection to that region of the sky?
As I tune in right now, I'm not really getting a yes around that, but definitely other celestial lifetimes where you've been living in spiritually advanced civilizations. So as most of the people listening to this probably can already agree, humanity is not in a very spiritually advanced place right now. We only have to turn on the news or look online at what's going on to see that's the case. But what happens is that species do advance spiritually. And a lot of the species that we've been in other lifetimes have been in cultures that are very advanced, that they're very much based on love and community and kindness and compassion. And generally that goes hand in hand with more advanced spiritual, intuitive, psychic abilities too, things like telepathy and mind transport. And I really get a strong sense for you, Chris, that you've lived in actually a number of these different societies. Let's see, I'm not sure I'm getting any specific names right off the top of my head, though, but that definitely resonates for me.
Very cool. Well, I've always felt like I was kind of one of those Star Trek people. Interstellar flight did not seem like, a stretch as far as flights of the imagination. It all seemed like it was very grounded in reality in one sense or another. And after we get back from our next commercial break, which is going to be coming up in just a minute or so here, we'll be looking at different levels of the work that Barrett is doing with reincarnation, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
When Dad needed help getting around, I became his driver. Soon enough, it was up to me to be his housekeeper and financial manager, too. When he moved in, I became his cook and even his nurse. But no matter what roles I play, I know I'm still his daughter.
We understand the roles you play. So to help, we created aarp.org/caregiving, where you can connect with experts and other caregivers. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
And we are back with Barrett Hadeen talking about past lives. And in that intermission there, they were talking about looking for your perfect soulmate, looking for lovers on the internet and, around the corner at the drugstore or wherever. And that, I assume, is probably a significant part of the work you're doing, working on relationships. Why am I attracted to this person? Why did this person dump me? That sort of thing. So how would you rate that as far as the highest percentage part of the work you're doing? Is it up there on the top or in that upper level, or where does that happen?
Yeah, I would say that it's I would say it's a pretty substantial portion, maybe, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the people I work with that we look at their relationship side of things. And, any number of people will come to me and part of the healing work that we might be doing is around, a recent breakup and the pain over that breakup. And it's not just about helping them move through the sadness so they can feel better. It's also about helping them clear through their soul patterns so that they don't have to recreate a similar painful, happening in their life, that they can actually start to heal some of the unconscious or subconscious beliefs that they have that drew this type of relationship to them, so they can move into a relationship that's better, a relationship that actually feels more grounded, more connected, more respectful, more loving and kind. The reason that we keep having relationships over and over again, that, if we look back at our life, a lot of times we can kind of see this like, oh, well, in so many ways, the last 5 relationships or 3 relationships, they all have these same characteristics. Why do I keep doing this? Well, from a soul level perspective, you're doing that because you have an energetic pattern. And you could say that you're working through something karmically that just hasn't healed yet. And that's why it keeps coming up. And once you can finally release that pattern, once you can let go of that old way of being, all of a sudden something new can come into your life. And you can have a kind of connection that, rather than just hearing about it and wishing that were actually happening for you, can actually show up in your life. And, these things happen both in relationships. For example, another big category is around work for people, their careers and how they make money. Do you find that you keep having the same kinds of people in your workplace that show up, and you quit this job to, get rid of that thing in your life, and the next job seems to have someone that's just like that? Why does that keep happening? Again, the same dynamic is happening. And it could be happening in family, it could be happening in your connection to money, it could be happening around work, around relationships. So there are a lot of different areas, or say physical health is another big category that a lot of people are working on and working through these things so that they don't have to keep experiencing the same painful circumstance over and over, that they can actually be done with the pattern and move on to something new.
Well, that's hopeful, and gives some people some real impetus to go ahead and communicate with you or somebody else who does the same work that you're doing. Now, another thought that kind of bubbled up in my mind as you were talking there was the idea of ethnic situations. And, have you ever come across somebody who in a past life perhaps was a Nazi, who was out there dragging people off to the death camps in Poland, and in this life they came in as a Jew, and we're trying to resolve or rectify these 2 different extremes in 2 very closely related lifetimes?
Yeah, the closest counterpart that I can think of is working with an African American client who had a past life as a slave owner. And, sort of the pain that they were dealing with in this lifetime over discrimination and, a lot of subtle or not so subtle things that happen on a daily basis that really kind of try to reinforce this sort of different level class system. It's not real, but, it's something that a lot of people are experiencing. And so part of her healing that was actually letting go of that past lifetime as a slave owner and realizing that, we've all actually been on both sides of every coin. So it's part of why, as you and I have talked about on other times, that there really are no victims. That the idea of victimization is not really the truth, because we've been both the victim and the victimizer. So if you take any situation, you're going to find that you can look at both sides of it. Now, someone who's kind of suffering over this idea of maybe being abused in some way in this lifetime usually doesn't like to look at the thought that maybe in another lifetime they've been an abuser. And the reason I bring that up is because when you look at these things with gentleness and with kindness and compassion, you can actually melt them away and let them go completely. So in no way are these sessions that I do with people ever about increasing guilt or having people feel bad for some lifetime that they've lived. It's only ever about letting go of old traumas, old pains. But sometimes in doing that work, we do open up to seeing things that aren't pleasant. So if we know that that's all done in the context and for the purpose of healing, then it helps us to know that there's no guilt around any of this. And what comes to mind is actually a real, this lifetime example, where now people can have their DNA tested and they can see the history, of their genealogy, and they can get kind of detailed to find out, who people's grandparents were and things like that. And Ben Affleck, the famous actor, had this done, and the people that were working with him, I think it was part of a TV show, had found out that one of his ancestors was a slave owner. And his response to it was to try to hush it up and to, try to, push it away, basically. But other people have come to these sort of same realizations and been able to just sort of bring it into the light. And I think those two different ways of being with the same information illustrate how we can be with unpleasant things, so that we can actually sort of, they say sunlight is the best disinfectant. And when we let the light into the dark corners that may be kind of hiding within us, that's the way that the healing happens, and that we can actually release these old patterns and step into the new.
Very good. And you were talking about guilt there. So in your work, to what level are you really putting attention on resolution of guilt? And why? Why should we worry about feeling guilt or shame in our day-to-day existence?
Well, as you know, Chris, I'm a student and a teacher of A Course in Miracles, and this path is really central to my life and to my path. And the heart of its teaching is that guilt is not real. Guilt is unfounded, and it doesn't serve us at all. So with all the work that I'm doing, when we're looking at, say, a specific lifetime or a multi-lifetime theme for someone, what we're doing is we're actually unplugging the whole ego thought system. We're unplugging this whole belief that something bad has happened. And it does fit in with this idea that's also central to the Course, which is that this world is an illusion. When we start to get this idea that this world is actually just a massive metaphysical dream, then even these sort of either painful or troubled past lives that we live, we realize that it's actually just been one dream lifetime after another dream lifetime, and that our deeper goal in all of this is to awaken. It's to awaken to the truth, and the truth is that you are love. The truth is that you are one with God. The truth is that you've never been apart from heaven, and you never can be. So all of these things are sort of like distracting dreams, but again, it's our belief in them that give them the power. So all of this healing work is really about relinquishing our attachment and our belief in these dreams, so that we can come to realize the deeper truth within.
Very good. So basically what we're doing is we're disassembling a lot of different illusions, and the technique that you work with sounds like it kind of cuts to the chase and really looks at the core of a lot of our beliefs within our dream time.
It's true. I think what most people don't realize is that the deepest problem that we all have is actually the belief in our individual selfhood. Now, this seems a little strange to say, but it's only ever our belief in being a body, belief in being a separate thing, a separate person, that causes suffering. And as we start to kind of work through this healing, we awaken more and more to this idea that we are one with everything. We are one with love itself. We are one with joy. We are one with happiness. And these seemingly heavy walls of separation, they just start melting or crumbling and falling away. And that's how we begin to really embrace the deeper message of truth and the experience that we can't really suffer. So these obviously are sort of high-level goals, but I think they're goals worth having, because when we can stand in this place, we can live a life that only has joy as its purpose.
Well, that's pretty empowering, actually, getting away from all of our self-imposed restrictions and inhibitions and limitations. But how does that affect everybody else? So in order for us to achieve self-forgiveness, what do we have to do about the person who, shot our cat last week, or the person who drove over our garbage cans this morning? Are we obliged then to work out some issues with other people too?
Well, in that case, it's time to get out the shotgun. No, I'm just kidding.
That works.
No, the thing is, when we're going to have problems in life, and we're going to have upsets. And what I'm not saying is that we should just pretend, airy-fairy, everything is great. I'm not really upset, even though deep down I'm about to blow my top. It's really important that we acknowledge our emotions and that we feel them, so that we can move through them and come into that deeper truth that we are.
Excellent, and we'll be right back after this, our final commercial break.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Dr. Kevin here, and I want to invite you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, to join me on the Dr. Kevin Show, where we have a diversity of guests who help you step outside the box, behind the curtain, and see what a load of crap is going on in the world today, so you have more information with which to make better decisions. We'll see you there. Namaste.
Hello, I'm John Lithgow. Manatees are unique, among the most amazing animals on Earth, but they're endangered. We pose the greatest threat to their survival. Many manatees are killed or injured by boats or other recreational activities. I'm a writer of children's books, including one about manatees, and I believe education is the key. You can be part of the solution. Please contact Save the Manatee Club right now. Call 1-800-432-JOIN. Thank you.
Barrett, how many people have you encountered who in a previous lifetime were a manatee or baboon or, some other life form here on the planet besides that which is human?
Lots and lots of manatees, no.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why they're going extinct now.
That's right. We need to reincarnate as them. That'll help save them. Interestingly, I have not really had much of that experience. I've heard people share their experiences where they've been animals in other lifetimes, But in my experience, what I found is that people reincarnate as people, or again, sometimes other humanoid life forms. And I do think that animals reincarnate. I think that dogs will reincarnate as dogs, and cats will reincarnate as cats, and trees will reincarnate as trees. And, life keeps kind of moving through these cycles this way. I actually had an interesting experience where I was driving through a city I'd never been in Erie, Pennsylvania, with a friend of mine, and I was only a little lost. I kind of knew generally my way, but I wasn't sure exactly where I was going. And all of a sudden, I turned to my left, and I saw a tree in someone's yard, and I had the deepest feeling of recognition, like I really knew this tree. And there was this feeling of love and compassion for this tree, and I knew in some other lifetime I had some really profound connection with that same life form that was now showing up in that tree. So I thought that was a pretty amazing experience.
That's very cool. And now, how about dreams? I know that a lot of times I have dreams that seem very, very visceral, and I wake up and I'm thinking, that couldn't be, real because it happened in, past life or in past times or future times, and I was running around in circumstances, wearing clothing, doing things that weren't part of modern society. Do we get a lot of information through our dreams about past lives, or again, is that more specific to individual people? Or, does it just kind of flood humanity occasionally?
Yeah, my feeling is that most of the time these doors within us start to open as we do our healing work. I think that our psychic gifts are actually a natural part of who we are. It's things, as I mentioned, like telepathy. It doesn't seem very common in our current world, but this is something that is actually a fairly normal thing that we can start to actually experience. I remember I was at a workshop a few years ago that someone was leading, and we did an exercise where we paired up, and one person would think of a city, and then the other person in the group would have to pick up, just mentally, without any, verbal communication, what that city was. And pretty much it all worked. We did it a number of times for like colors and animals and a few different things. And pretty much everyone in the group was able to do this. So it's a gift that I think is sort of like a muscle within us that is not really used. So it's sort of a weak muscle, but it's a capability that really is a natural thing that we all have. And I think that that dreams can just be a reflection of that. And, I kind of used the word before about how within the mind, this thought of separation has walls. And then as we heal, these walls start to fall. They start to kind of melt away. Well, as these walls melt, then these things become more and more possible. So, in the beginning, when I started to get information about other lifetimes for myself, and then eventually for people I was working with, it was a little surprising and kind of fascinating. And I've really shifted into it really just feeling normal. Like, it's almost a little more surprising that everyone can't do this. But because I really think that everyone can do it. They just maybe haven't opened themselves up to this yet. And I think it's something that, again, in the future, I think more and more people will have this ability, and, it will just be kind of more and more a normal part of our world.
Right. Well, that makes complete sense that as you develop confidence in a skill like that, you're obviously going to be gaining more competence. So, and kind of a final thought here before we wind up our dialogue. How about people who are born, who give birth, who become parents to children with autism? disability, speech issues, psychological issues. You know, I know a lot of kids come into this world and they have night terrors for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years of their existence. So do people come to you about children and about issues they're having with their kids, looking for answers, looking for resolution?
Well, I have worked with a few parents that have been having problems with their children, and one of the things I think that is really important is that the parents realize that it is not their fault. Again, as we go back to this idea of letting go of guilt, most of the time, people living with people who have an illness or an issue or some sort of birth issue that they come in with, they feel responsible in some way, whether there's a logical reason for that or not. And one of the points that I really want to emphasize here is that there is no guilt or blame for these things happening. From a soul lifetime, again, because we sort of lived all the good lifetimes and we've lived all the not so good lifetimes, as a soul, we basically kind of have it planned out. We have it laid out ahead of us that the next lifetime is going to be something like X, where X may be a lifetime where we have autism, a lifetime where we have mental disability, a lifetime that doesn't last very long, that may not survive, until birth, or it might not survive much past birth. So these things are sort of already planned out. And I think it's really important to say this because otherwise there tends to be a whole lot of suffering and a whole lot of blaming of what is happening and a feeling like something is wrong. It may look wrong to us, but ultimately what's wrong about this whole thing is culturally our idea that every person is going to live until they're in their 80s or the hundreds. It's just not true. And the fact that we believe that it should be that way, it causes a lot of grief and a lot of heartache. And I'm not here to say you shouldn't feel bad when your loved one may be suffering or transitioning. But the more we can put it into this larger framework, the less pain has to accompany these things that do unfold here within these lives that we live.
Right. Well, now, people who are listening in, I'm sure that there are going to be 1 or 2 or 10 or 12 or hopefully dozens who will want to get in touch with you. So how do people track you down in this current space-time continuum?
Well, my website has a lot of information about the types of classes and workshops I lead and also the one-on-one healing sessions that I provide. It's also a way to sign up for a free 15-minute healing session with me, and that is just my name, which is BarretHedeen.com. That's BarretHedeen.com. People can even actually call me directly. My phone number is 847-951-6328. And I'm happy to share more about this and answer any questions that people might have.
Great. I wonder how many people are going to pop up now claiming to have known you in a past lifetime. They'll be calling you and saying, Barrett, do you remember that lifetime when we were Pirates of the Caribbean?
Well, I actually have a good friend. He's got some pain in his knee, and he gives me a hard time. He says that back in our swashbuckling days, I stuck a sword in his knee, and he's been suffering ever since.
Ouch! That does sound rather severe, but a lot of times people do get kind of what's the word for it, wound up with a little bit of self-glorification there too. So it's all your fault, Barrett.
Right. Well, that's kind of the joke. He knows it's not the case, so but we just kind of play with it. And I think that's an important thing too, is to remember to have fun with all this. It's easy as we explore ourselves and look at some of these dark corners within our mind to feel heavy about it or to feel sad. And I think it's really important to not get too grim on our spiritual path, because light and joy and laughter are really the path to self-awareness and to a deeper state of knowing your truth.
Right. It's all a journey that has no real destination other than to just awaken and realize, wow, that was pretty crazy. So as we wind out the rest of the show here, is there anything about any past lives that you pick up around me that I should put some attention on right now? Am I suppressing or blocking anything?
You know, what comes up for me, Chris, is that there's some sadness, and it feels like it's connected to the heart. So I think that's something we could explore a little bit more, but it might be helpful to see maybe there's a past life where you lost a loved one and you're still healing through that.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Barrett, for joining me for this hour of discussion on OMTimes Radio, and we'll be back in 1 week.
All right. This has been great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.